Hey, Mickey. Yeah. What's it feel like to die?
This is the question Mickey Barnes hears from people over and over again. What's it like? How does it feel? And since Mickey is quite literally reprinted every time he dies, does it even matter? The answer is, well, he doesn't really have one. He accepts that his life is disposable. Nobody actually treats this guy like a real human, and he doesn't feel like he deserves any better. His job is to be an expendable, and this is a story about someone who is completely powerless to the point of giving up control of his own life and death. Mickey gives up that power willingly because he doesn't see himself as worthy of anything, even basic treatment as another human, and it takes physically coming face to face with a different version of himself for Mickey to start fighting to live. I have been looking forward to Mickey 17 since it was first announced. It has been one of my most anticipated movies of the past few years through multiple delays. Now it is finally here. Bong Joon Ho is back, and this movie is a lot crazier and weirder than I anticipated. I read the book Mickey 7 by Edward Ashton, so I knew what I was getting into. I expected this to be a weird one, especially after the trailers, and it still ended up surprising me, but not necessarily in a good way. I'm going to be honest, I was pretty disappointed, and the more I thought about it, the more disappointed I felt. So let's talk about it. Robert Pattinson plays Mickey Barnes, an expendable on a spaceship that's on its way to colonize a distant icy planet, Niflheim. His job is basically to be experimented on and to be given very dangerous missions that will likely result in him dying, which he does. Mickey dies over and over and over again, and every time he dies, a new version of him comes out of this human printer, hence the title, Mickey 17. It's the 17th version of him.
17.
How long have you been 17?
So far, so good, right? We have an interesting concept. We have Robert Pattinson having a great time playing multiple characters because we do see different iterations of him. We have a fun supporting cast. We have Bong Joon Ho behind the scenes, and you know he's going to make this into an interesting blend of genres, injecting his signature sense of humor. But this is where things quickly started to go south for me. It's undeniably a unique movie, and it's not often that you see sci-fi mixed with sharp, brutal satire, dark humor, a bit of romance, and a variety of social and political commentary all in one. But that's also kind of the problem, because not only is Mickey 17 a mess of all of those things, let's call it what it is, but it's also as over the top and unsubtle as it gets. This movie is for those of you who loved Okja. I did not love Okja. We don't need to get into this now, but it's my least favorite of Bong's 8 films. Do let me know if you want to see a full ranking though. And I have very similar problems between those two, which is frustrating because in both cases, I agree with what the director is trying to say. I'm on board with the themes. I just don't love the delivery and the tonal chaos. And I know what you're going to say. His films are almost always incorporating some level of tonal shifts. He is known for injecting humor into the most bleak situations, which can be jarring. But for me, it's all about balance. And in Mickey 17, the balance is way off. Everything is so exaggerated and over the top, sometimes straight up goofy, that the movie ends up being a farce. And farce is really not my genre. For some people, this will be great. If this is your brand of comedy and you enjoy complete chaos, you're going to love it. Me personally, I thought it was funny for a bit, but it got old pretty quickly and it went on for too long. Some of the movie worked for me, some of it really didn't. Also, is subtlety dead? Is it just completely done with because it feels like it is? Bong Joon Ho can be very blunt in his movies, especially in his English language projects, but it's such a shame when you know from his other films that he's capable of beautiful nuance and complexity he knows how to use that bluntness strategically in a balanced way, that when you see Mickey 17 have the subtlety of a sledgehammer all the way through, you can't help feeling disappointed, or at least I can't help it, because it's the equivalent of trying to have a conversation with someone who is constantly yelling. Now, it may sound like I hated this movie. I didn't, so here are some things I enjoyed. Right off the bat, it looks great, and the cinematography by Darius Kanji does not disappoint. The native species of the planet, the creepers, loved them. They're adorable. After reading the book, I was so curious how they were going to visualize them, and I think they nailed it. The performances are really good. Obviously, Robert Pattinson is great, and you can tell he's having a great time with the character. Even though I did not appreciate the choice to do a voice, I didn't mind the accent. Pattinson loves his accents, but did we need to go full Steve Buscemi here? I don't think so. The voice was getting on my nerves. But as far as carrying this movie, I think he did an excellent job, and I particularly enjoyed seeing the contrast between Mickey 17 and Mickey 18. The supporting cast is a lot of fun as well. I really liked Steven Yeun in this film, even though his character in the book is done a lot better. I think he brings a lot to what he had to work with. Toni Collette is something else. Her and Mark Ruffalo play this weird, evil, authoritarian power couple, and I actually enjoyed her character and performance more than I did Mark Ruffalo, just because she seemed a little bit more interesting in a weird way, whereas Ruffalo's Kenneth Marshall is very one note. And I get that that's a choice. I understand the satire when it comes to dictators and colonization, and it is interesting how timely this feels at the moment in particular, but it doesn't really go anywhere. You see it for what it is from the very beginning, and that's just it. It relies on how continuously entertained you are by this particular portrayal. I will say, I was a lot more interested in the sci-fi elements and the creepers than I was in the satire, and I think those elements were done really well. That's what ultimately kept me interested in the movie. I loved the world building we got. My sci-fi loving heart was so happy to see it, and I just wanted more. I would have loved for Mickey 17 to lean even further into all of that, particularly exploring the technical and moral implications of cloning. I was surprised how uninterested a movie about cloning was in questions of humanity and personhood. This is something the book actually touches on in a more meaningful way, particularly when it comes to memories and the concept of a soul. It's not a fully developed conversation there either, but there is a lot more to talk about when the novel keeps coming back to the idea of the ship of Theseus, which, if you're not familiar, is the question of whether or not an object is still the same object if over time you slowly replace all of the original components. Obviously, in this case, it applies to Mickey and his iterations, particularly combined with how taboo multiples are in this world, which is also explored better in the book, and whether or not the people around him even see him as a human anymore. The film, on the other hand, is much more focused on satire and on telling the story of how willing others are to use someone whose life they don't value to their advantage, how those in power see and treat people they deem disposable. While this is a big part of the novel and a fascinating idea, in the movie, all of those rich themes with a lot of potential for depth are overshadowed by the aggressive satire, as well as by the sheer amount of things the film wants to briefly address without actually diving into them. Even when it comes to the characters, this is the first Bong Joon Ho film where most of the characters didn't feel like they were actual people. There are a few characters like that in Okja and Snowpiercer, but here it's pretty much everyone, and most of them are caricatures. This surprised me because one of Bong's signature themes in his movies is human fallibility and the choices that make his characters feel so real, the motivations that are full of urgency. That is what makes his stories come to life, even when he leans towards absurdism or moves further away from realism just to make a point. Unfortunately, I felt very little of that here. Here's the thing, even though I would rather have a Mickey 17 type of movie every month or every week preferably, instead of this deluge of uninspired IP entries and sequels and reboots and remakes and whatever else we get that just feels like it's a property rather than a work of art, Mickey 17 is still a mixed bag for me. While the movie tries quite a few different things in its execution, the main ideas Mickey 17 has to offer are nothing new for Bong Joon Ho as a filmmaker and have been done better and more thoughtfully in his previous films. His criticism of capitalism and class division, his ridicule of leaders and politics, his concern for the environment, all of that has been an important part of his filmmaking for a while. But what surprises me is that a director capable of so much depth and nuance, who can tell a story with patience and finesse, has gone on to make a film like this. I did enjoy individual elements and ideas of this movie, even though it didn't quite come together for me. I think I appreciated the potential more than what we ended up getting here. Overall, I still had fun watching Mickey 17, especially on the big screen with an audience. It was a unique and very entertaining theatrical experience, even considering that this movie was over the top and had too much going on, down to a few really brutal horror film worthy scenes I would have preferred to be implied rather than on full display. Not because I have a problem with horror, I love horror, as you guys know if you've been around my channel, but the tonal roller coaster was just not for me this time around. Again, it's all about balance and nuance, which we're missing here. That being said, while it may not be Bong Joon Ho's best, Mickey 17 still has a lot to offer and a lot to say, and I do appreciate that. I just hope the writer-director gets back to his usual, more nuanced and intricate storytelling soon. And as for the repeated question of what's it feel like to die, I think the better question we should be asking is, in a world that expects us to serve our purpose and die, what does it feel like to actually make the choice to live?